welcome, and it's that time of the week again. It's the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm your host, David Zidel, and we're going to talk business. Tonight we're with Bradley Fisher. Good evening, Bradley.
Good evening, David.
Great to have you here, and I'm going to get to Bradley in a second. But I just want to let you know that if you haven't listened to the show before, we go through a little bit of a business story, and then I'll talk to Brad, and then maybe Brad might relate some of the things through to his story that relate to the story. And the story is actually about a bee, the story. So apparently, bees have an amazing communication skill. They go and they find some pollen, and then they come back to the hive, and they do this incredible dance. And the dance tells the other bees two things. It tells them the direction and the distance to the pollen. And so the other bees know exactly where to go to get the pollen. But that's not even the most interesting part. The interesting part is that 80% of the bees go directly to the pollen. 20% don't. 20% almost didn't get the email, or maybe didn't get the bee mail. They have no idea what it looks like. They have no idea what they're doing, and they fly elsewhere. And you think, what's wrong with those bees? But it's a fascinating business lesson in a way. Even though they know where to go, 20% don't go there. And the reason for that is that they're looking for new sources of pollen. And the lesson for us as business people is, even if you know where your money's coming from, you got to be keep looking for new sources of business, always on the lookout. So you get 80% of your effort is going to where your money is now, but 20% needs to be looking for new business. And that 80-20 rule is known as the Pareto rule. And if you look at things, there are so many things that relate to the Pareto rule. So many things that link to it. I mean, even if you're getting dressed, go to your cupboard and open up your cupboard. And I guarantee you will see that you wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time. And the other 80% of your clothes, you only wear 20% of the time. So that's the Pareto rule, or the 80-20 rule, and it relies on business. And in business, even if you've got a great source of income, you still need to be looking for other sources of income. Now, there's another rule that I came across, which is the 90-10 rule. And I'm not too sure about this one, but it says that in bigger companies, how's this for astounding, that 10% of the company's employees are normally responsible for 90% of the output. That means that the majority of the people you have are just fulfilling stuff, and they're not giving the output that you need. And the problem for companies is to understand who's the 90 and who's the 10. So that's the lesson for today. And I think even if you listen to the show, hopefully you'll enjoy 80% of the show, but maybe you won't enjoy other 20%, and that's normal, and that's okay. So with us tonight, as I said, we've got Brad Fisher. And Brad grew up in Joburg, went to Greenside High School, and in fact, at the age of 16, he started selling sunglasses and watches and hats at a marketplace. Why did he decide that? For some reason, and I'm not sure if you can either share it with us or he maybe doesn't even remember, his dad had these new folding sunglasses, and he thought he would sell those. And the interesting thing is they didn't really sell initially. So Brad went and then got watches and got hats, and then learnt about the so-called flea market business. And this was at the age of 16, and carried on doing that for about 2 years. He then went to university in Cape Town, and he helped a local pub there called the Pig and Whistle. I'm sure anyone who's been in Cape Town or close to UCT knows the Pig and Whistle. They had a tough crowd that was starting to come to the Pig and Whistle, and Brad helped them to regain the student crowd. And the interesting thing about that is he said he got the student crowd in, and he earned a percentage or commission on that. But what he didn't realize is the owner was looking to sell the business. And because there was more people, he got a better price for the business. And Brad shared with me when I spoke to him before that had he known that the purpose was to sell the business, maybe he could have negotiated a better deal, a percentage of the commission. But these are things that you learn as you go along. And in 1993, Brad, together with a friend, Brent, launched the Rosebank Rooftop Market. And it was called B&B, what was it?
B&B Markets.
B&B Markets. Brad and Brent. And they started the market, and because it was on the rooftop and people couldn't see it from the street, they had to find ways of advertising the market. And Brad used street poles to advertise it, and that in turn, and Brad's going to discuss the whole business for us, into its own business of ad reach that he founded and is recently still involved, but has sold out, I think, most of it, or still involved with it. There are other things that Brad got involved with, and that was the Soweto Canoe Club. And in fact, there was a movie, I can't remember the name of the movie.
Beyond the River.
Beyond the River, which I actually saw a few years ago, a fantastic movie about the canoeing. So what Brad is amazing at as an entrepreneur is starting something, finding opportunities, and linking things together. The pole advertising helped with lighting up the locations and some of the areas where there weren't lights. So we're going to unpack a little bit about that. So Brad, welcome. It's good to have you here. And if you can just share with us, where did your entrepreneurial journey start? What do you see yourself as an entrepreneurial, which everyone says you are, but sometimes people don't see it themselves. And where did that journey start? What started it for you?
I guess you're right. The first venture into the entrepreneurial world was Rees Street Flea Market. And funny enough, it started as a dismal failure. That first Saturday morning, we never sold one pair of glasses. But I think that's the bug bit. I didn't think we were setting out to set up a business. We had this idea for a bit of fun, we'll go and sell the glasses. And when we didn't, the bug bit on how we could actually reinvent it and try and make a success of it.
So I want to stop you there, because a lot of people would try something and then go back and say, oh, we didn't sell anything, and just give it up. What made you say, hang on, I like this, even though I'm not selling, and then try and invent it? Was there something that said, don't give up?
I think, to be honest, we enjoyed the vibe of being there and wanted to work out how we could stay there. That's, if I have to be brutally honest. But yeah, I do, as a personality trait, not like giving up. So I suppose that came in somewhere, but I don't think it was as clear cut as I had this burning passion to go into business at 16. We ended up there and we enjoyed it, and then thought, well, this is quite a fun thing, and worked out what we could sell to make a bit of money, and learned quite a lot in the process.
That's fantastic. And so you started jigging it, and for how long were you at that marketplace? And did you make money initially?
We were there for about 2 years, and we made some pocket money, but at that stage it was good money for us. And then I went off to university. It actually, I think, helped me. I got a bursary for UCT, and the guy who was interviewing me, just thinking back, focused quite a lot about that Saturday. It was a Saturday morning. I said, are you keeping me out of business? And he focused quite a lot of his time on that. And I think I didn't have the best marks in the world, so I don't quite know how I had the lowest marks of all the burses. So I think it actually did help me, ironically, get into university. So, but that's where that ended. And then, as you said, at varsity, there was this opportunity with a Pig and Whistle that, again, I didn't wake up one morning thinking, how can I make some money? I was asked by the owner of the Pig and Whistle to try and get my res I was the head student of my res in that year, to get the students there, and he was going to give me a sweatshirt and a few free beers. And from that, the idea grew that actually UCT reclaims the pig as a nice theme, trying to fight out the naval students that would come there, and it had turned into quite a rough place. And it was a nice campaign, which I thought I was being very smart on. I had a percentage of the upside of the turnover, only to find out that he was selling the place a few months later. And so really it was reasonably successful campaign, but it was a failed business venture. But again, learned a fair bit from it.
So it's interesting that I've heard from many entrepreneurs that what they do might not succeed, but the lessons that they learn and the things that they gain from it take them to the next step. So for you, running the market and earning a little bit of pocket money gave you your bursary, in a way, potentially.
I think so.
And then doing the pig and whistle gave you another insight into business. And so you were learning along the way, even though some people might look on the outside and say that's a failed venture. It wasn't. It was a learning process for you. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. And you learn, it's true, you learn a lot more from failure. So long as you can fail without betting the farm. I think that's what Richard Branson says. You can, at that stage, we had nothing. But if you've had some success, if you had a little bit of money that you built up, and you're going to go and bet it all on the next venture, that's a problem. If you bet half the farm, you can always build back up. So you can go into things and give things a full go, so long as you're not betting everything, and you will learn, and you'll hopefully do better the next time. But you can't be silly about it and cavalier and just throw everything at it. And I've roughly stuck with that formula. You've got to take a gamble as an entrepreneur, but you can't bet everything on that gamble. Most things fail, unfortunately. When you're talking about the 80-20, 90-10, the only way I could think of how to apply it is only 10%, if you're lucky, of the things that you work out as a good idea will actually pan out in practice. 90% won't. It's probably more like 98, 2%. But if the 2%'s got some basis, and you're agile enough to work on that 2%, and as long as you're again not betting everything on it, and you can learn when you're in the market. You've now tried, rather than strategize in the boardroom, you've got out there. The market will very quickly tell you what they want or don't want. It doesn't matter what you've strategized. When you get out there and launch, you very quickly work out that folding sunglasses is a bad idea. And if you're agile enough to get cheap normal sunglasses from around the corner, you might still come right. So the 90-10 thing would be 98-2, which is the 2% of the time do you plan something and it actually works out according to plan. 98%, you launch it. If you're lucky enough to have a spark somewhere in that launch, you've got to then rejig it completely. And that's where you learn the most in the market, not speculating on the side.
So your customers, in a way, will tell you what you need to do.
Exactly.
So take us through the concept of how did you come up with the idea of creating a rooftop market? Were marketplaces available then? Were you the first one to do that? And kind of just the step-by-step process of what went through your mind, and then how did you actually do that?
So I've got to give 100% of the credit to Brent for that, because I wasn't looking for going into market business. I actually had to work off the bursary with Goldfields, who had given me the bursary. But they laid off a whole lot of us, and Brent was doing a court case on flea markets. He was became an advocate eventually, but he was doing his articles. And he saw the figures. There was a market in the south. And he said to me, but Brad, when you were at UCT, you did a report, or you had some sort of a job for the waterfront, setting up the blue shed, which is actually still there in Cape Town. And so you know a bit about it. Why don't we set up a market somewhere where there's not one? There wasn't anything in the north. It was Broome had just launched. And actually, so I certainly wasn't my smarts or my intuition that came up with the idea. Brent did. And yeah, then we worked hard at it. And that was one of those where it actually worked out quite closely to how we thought it might pan out. And as youngsters, we just thought, well, everything's like this. It wasn't. But we also made our luck. We worked hard at it. And it worked well in there.
So the Broome market you weren't involved in?
We weren't. In fact, Brent and I were chucked out of the Broome market, literally frog marched out, because we were trying to solicit traders.
Okay, so
2 months before our launch. We subsequently became friends with Mark, who's passed on tragically. But no, we were not part of it. That was a guy called Mark. Gee, I've forgotten his surname. Israelson, who ran that market.
Right. So just take me back a little bit. So you're talking about you went and you tried to get people into the market. So can you think back and can you remember the process? Did you sit down and draw a business plan, or what was the process, and how did you land up with the concept of a rooftop market, which was different to other markets, because other markets you could see from the road? This is inherently difficult because no one's looking up at the roof, wouldn't be able to see it from the street. What kind of are you able to go back to that time and if I said to you, what were your steps? If I wanted to follow your steps, what were those steps in creating that?
Okay, the only thing I had learned from Cape Town was the value of a covered market. So there was no idea of a rooftop market. We realized that compared to an open air market, cover is a huge value. You can get better people with better product. So when Brent and I went looking in Sandton and Rosebank, somewhere in the north, to launch a market, the one place we found that was closed was the Rosebank Mall that had a parking area with a high roof, which could then double up as a market on the weekend. So that rooftop term was something we had to use so we could quickly depict where it was, because you couldn't see it. So when we did advertising, it was a Sunday rooftop market was an easy way, quite succinctly, to tell people where it was. But it was a weakness, actually. You couldn't see the thing. It wasn't dramatic to be on the roof. It was just that it was covered.
But the benefit was that it's covered in case there's rain, which was the.
So then we had a thing, rain or shine rooftop market, we opened. So we used that as a selling tool. The issue was, how on earth do you need to make a market work. If you've got 400 stalls, you need 10, 12,000 people through that market per day. Otherwise, your stock disappears the following week. Your stock being your traders, not the following week, maybe the next month. If you don't get 10,000 through on a Sunday, so how do you do that from a standing start? The car count in Rosebank the week before we launched the market was 7 cars in the whole of Rosebank outside a restaurant, the only one open, the Tivoli. I know that because we had to submit reports to the Joburg Council.
Right.
And so how do you get from that to 10,000 people through there? That was the challenge. And we didn't have marketing budget. So that was the thing that we had to overcome. And the way we did it was, first of all, a very big event. I think we had African jazz pioneers. We managed to do a deal with them. I think they played for free, but we promoted them.
But that was when you already had stall owners.
No, we were signing up stall. You see, you've got two balls in the air.
Right.
You've got to convince stall owners that on the day of the launch, there's going to be sufficient people to buy their product, or certainly they'll give you a month because you took 1 month free. 1 month fees up front. And you had to also then convince the public that there's going to be 400, 500 stalls. Otherwise, they're not going there. And the one constant we had was, if we can find enough money to tell the public, but tell them something's happening like the African Jazz Pioneers, which you knew was a draw at the time, that we'd be sure of a certain number of feet on the first day.
Right.
So we then would tell traders that it's the Rosebank Mall's Sunday effort to open the centre, which eventually did happen. And we were able to, through street pole advertising, ironically, which is the business I'm in today, we were able to cheaply stick up banner headlines just saying rooftop market open, grand opening Sunday. And it worked. People came to see this thing. And from there, we were able to sustain it long enough that the traders stayed on and we built the business.
So if you just tuned in, I'm David Zidel. This is the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm speaking to Brad Fisher, and we're unpacking his experience in starting the Rosebank rooftop market, and then how that led to other businesses. But it's time to take an ad break. Welcome back to the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm David Zidel. I'm busy talking to Brad Fisher, and he's talking about his experience with the rooftop market. And just before the break, Brad was saying he's juggling two balls in the air, because you're trying to convince people to come and open a store, and at the same time, because there's people, but then you're trying to convince people to come because there's stores. And you said you used a music concert in a way of doing it, but then you said you used the pole advertising. Just go through that concept. How did you advertise, and was it successful? And how many people did you get? Did you get sufficient people, and did you have enough people selling stuff at the market on that first week?
So we were able to sign up the stalls on the basis that we were at the right time. Timing's very important. Broome had launched. There was another market, Petticoat Lane. So there were people looking to grow, which helped us. We were able to play on the fact that it was Rosebank Mall themselves had movies and they were all going to open up. That didn't quite at the beginning, which traders bought into. And we were able to convince the traders that we were going to put sufficient effort into the launch to get the people there. We didn't really have enough budget to do it traditionally. Certainly couldn't have been on TV or too many newspapers. I think we did a little bit of radio, and we did this big campaign on the street bowls.
Was it your own money that you guys had put in, or did you get funders involved, or was Rosebank involved as well? Because
No,
I think that's another ball in the air. Or did they say, try it, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Or did you have to sign a long-term contract with them for the use of the rooftop?
So we wanted to sign a contract that was as long as possible, because we knew if it was successful, then the rent, which is exactly what happened, would be hiked, or they would put a competitor in there, or whatever. So we were right from the beginning, we were very keen to get security of tenure, 3 years with an option for 3, and we would have done 5 years with an option for 5, because our sureties at that stage meant nothing. We had nothing. But and they didn't contribute to the advertising at all. What they did is they gave us the roof for 1,000 Rand a day, because that's what they charged once for a photo shoot, which was very cheap. And yeah, we didn't have funding. We had a student loan that had about there was a 10,000 student loan from Standard Bank that had about 8,000 Rand left. And Brent had his articles salary for the 4 months before the launch. That was it. And we had this guy that opened Jetline, a guy called Mike. He just opened a Jetline, I think the first maybe, in Rosebank. And we told him about our vision, and he allowed us to print on credit. I think we gave him a stall there, or I don't know how we wangled it.
If I could stop you there. So for anyone who's just listening to this, that type of running a business, there's a term for it, which is called bootstrapping. It's by getting the business to almost fund itself, and it's by doing these deals with different people, so you don't have to upfront have a lot of money. You're making these deals to make things work, and I think that's a nice example of bootstrapping.
And then the other thing we were able to do was, once we got a bit of momentum, it took so long to get the first person to actually sign up to the market to put their deposit down, but they would pay for the full month. So once whatever the figure was, once we got that 1,000 Rand in, and the numbers started to get to 20, 30, 40 traders, now we had a bit of cash flow. We could maybe pay Market Jetline, but we were printing literally on newspaper, bond paper with black and red, small, and we were going to the Pick and Pay, cutting up boxes, stapling the bond thing to the boxes with string, and we were driving around. I had a Jetta in those days with a massive trailer. We would go and just erect these posters right through the night on poles everywhere.
So you were doing it physically yourself?
We were doing it physically ourselves. We picked up a few guys in Hillbrow that actually some of them probably still work. I was asked Don, who runs the market now. They were with us for years, that team of 5 guys. Some of them came with me to AdReach eventually.
Wow.
But yeah, they were picked up. So, Brent had a very good guy that had worked with him, Jabulani, for years, and he knew some hardworking, tough guys in Hillbrow that ended up helping us at night, helping us lay the tables at the market, being security. That was the core of the team that we went forward on. In fact, those guys were part of the reason we started AdReach. They said, a lot of guys were asking, can we also put up posters for other events? And our first client ever was 702 Concert in the Zoo.
Right.
We ended up putting up their campaign and Business Day. We put up the banner headlines for Business Day.
That's amazing.
And then from that, Adaptability was developed, and we went into.
So just to go back, in those days, could you just go and put posters on any street lamp? There was no control, there were no regulations. Was everybody just sticking things on street lamps, or how did that work?
Thought maybe you wouldn't ask that. So the truth, you had to have an event that was non-commercial. And then you could get a sticker from the city, and you could put up adverts. And it was pretty cheap and reasonable to get the sticker. But they wouldn't give us the sticker because they said it's commercial, which it was. There was no other way of dressing it up. So we did do the first campaigns that first month illegally. We used to stick it up at night. The cops would walk around taking it down, and we would put it up until really we could see this was going to be a business. And so could the city. And they basically called us in, and we had to then come up with other ways of view, because without that, I don't think we would have survived. We had to do the street ball advertising. It's a very powerful thing for something like an event. And we then realized that, look, this is going to be a business, a proper business. We can't have an illegal backbone, an illegal activity. It's just one thing, we were 2 young guys having a go on a Sunday. It's now becoming a business, and you're sticking these things up and the cops are pulling them down. It's not sustainable. And the concept of adopt-a-lite was hatched. Now,
Just explain that concept, the Dr. Light.
because first of all, I must say that my concept didn't go through. My concept was, if the city would allow us to use unemployed people in Alex, there was an association to be involved in putting up these posters and taking them down and getting rid of illegal stuff. Would they allow us to put up frames and proper advertising that you now see on street billboards, like billboards on the poles? And the city said no, but they had heard about another concept. It wasn't actually our idea, called adopt-a-lite. So we met this guy from the university, and he had this concept of, he just didn't know how to make it a reality, of if you could tell a corporate that they could have 10 streetlights to advertise High FM on Glen Hazel Road, but they must put up 10 streetlights in Alex. And we were upfront and said we would do this, we would be the commercial partner, we would do this for profit, but there would be this tremendous community development and immediate delivery. And the city bought into this, and the university bought into this, and we were the commercial arm of the partnership. The University of Natal Innovation Foundation, who had brainstormed this thing in one of the lectures, were the guys that made sure the lights went up in the townships. And then the residents in the townships were the beneficiaries. So we were running a business, but we were driving community. And actually ad reach, advertising, driving outreach is how we started.
Okay. But now, was there electricity or power there, or were there solar lamps? I think it was before solar.
No, it was way before solar, and there wasn't electricity. So there was a figure of 10,000 a street light with electricity, and then you'd have to work out, if you signed a deal with Vodacom, I don't know who it was in those days. I think our first client was some focus group was actually our first client, some personal agency. They would sign on a year's contract at whatever it was, 10 grand a month, so it's 100 grand. That would be enough for 10 street lights. We'd have to, but there would have to be margin in it for us to make profit. So it was on the back of that there'd be enough money to put in the cable and put up the street light. And the first 10 million rands of the street lights, and it was roughly a 50-50. The amount that we would take out of it and the amount that the community would get was about a 50-50, which is a good formula. And I'd actually argue that you'd end up with more streetlights that way around than if 100%, like the university were trying to do, on a pure charitable basis, went in to put up the lights. Case in point, they never got one light up.
Yeah, because
ours was driven by business, which is not a swear word, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Business for purpose is what I'm all about. But the purpose part's what's so sadly lacking as today in the world, as you see the rich getting rich and the poor getting poorer. The business for purpose to me is the formula, not charity. I'm not so sure charities are as sustainable or as effective in community delivery as a business. Business driven by profit, but underpinned by doing good, the full purpose.
So if I understand you correctly, you want to be doing good, but the person doing good has to be paid their portion, and that's where it's the business for purpose.
Got to be commercial. When we tried things purely for good, and we did, we set up a program. So adopt-a-lite went to adopt a project. The next project was putting up street names in Soweto, same principle. There were no street names. We went and said to the city, we'll put up 5,000 poles with like a Mandela drive. It was very complicated. We had to go to each street committee and see if they're happy with the name. And then Sal C was our first guy that would then be on top of that street name who had sponsored the poll. And we, in theory, and that one didn't work out very well. The lights went up, the street names went up, but we couldn't make a profit out of it. The problem with that is eventually who then maintains it, which is exactly right. So it's got to be business driving purpose. If it's just purpose, eventually we handed that one over to the city, and it hasn't been that well maintained. And when we've done it for pure goodwill, like the wastepreneurs, I started helping waste pickers we had a site in Parkhurst called Wastepreneurs, and that was pure non-profit. The problem with that is, and we set the thing up and we did quite well, but if it was driven by profit, someone would have had 20 of these things set up at all of the pick-it-up sites. It probably would have been a business opportunity where these guys could have got involved in higher and higher waste beneficiation and ultimately been the waste pickers involved in pelletizing, and it could have done tremendous stuff. There's 100,000 of these guys that are bloody hardworking, and they don't get looked after. They don't get looked after.
Must be the most I've seen.
They're incredibly hardworking guys, and that's why we got involved. But there's a good example of And I had to keep trying to convince average shareholders why I'm doing this. And the rationale was, if you do good and the community you seem to be doing a good thing in the community, and you're solving a problem for the city, the chances of renewing rights with the city would be higher. So there was kind of a business for purpose angle. The problem was the residents ended up, for wrong reasons, not being in favor of the waste pickers. Get into that. But the point I was trying to raise is business driving purpose, in my view, is the answer of how you can fast track delivery, not just pure purpose, because we could only dedicate 1 or 2 hours to the thing a month. And how far can you get like that? I could do a bit, then I get sucked into having to pay the bills. But if that thing is paying the bills, you can put a lot more focus and effort in, and then you end up with something that works and sustainable.
So when you're saying put effort in and put focus in, as an entrepreneur, and people, I've heard the term over and over again, you got to work hard and you got to work smart. And what do all those things mean? Like, how do you come up? Somebody sitting at home today listening to us. And if you just tuned in, I'm David Zidel. This is the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm speaking to Brent Fisher, who's talking about his entrepreneurial journey, in fact. But how do you go from having an idea to making it happen? I've spoken to many people who have great ideas. In fact, I've had great ideas that I've never executed on. And then you have someone like yourself who starts executing one thing, but then sees how it can be adapted and changed and adapted more and more and more until you've got a complete different product. What's the thinking process? So somebody sitting at home today who thinks they've got a great idea, what do they do with that idea? How do they move from an idea into creating something, even if it's completely different to what they thought it was? But you've got to do something to change. You can't just sit and think about it. So
okay, so first of all, we weren't successful idea after idea. We thought we could be in the beginning. We absolutely weren't. In fact, second market we launched was successful, third, fourth, and fifth weren't. And many things we tried, because you think, well, it's easy, but actually most things are not easy. So first of all, it's a bit of a misnomer saying, or thinking that whatever we sort of tried, we could jiggle it a bit. That doesn't work. You've got to really focus on one thing and not a whole lot of things. Stick to your knitting is true. And if you're sitting at home thinking of what that thing is, you've got to have the passion, but you've got to have some inside track, some knowledge on that particular industry. It's very difficult sitting outside an industry that you've got no knowledge on. It's like you and I talking about going into an AI business, and we're not really guys that are sharp in that area. The chances are very slim that we're going to pull it off. So you have to have some angle where you know that there's a development coming, and if you put this thing here eventually, you need some inside track, you need some knowledge in that particular thing. If you don't have that, not that you won't be successful, it's a lot harder. And then you've also got to expect that even though you've got the knowledge and you think it's going to work the way in the boardroom you've planned, nothing fails in an Excel spreadsheet. And that's saying when you get out there, it's going to be very different. But at least if you've got underpinned by some knowledge or some angle, you've got a chance. And then you've got to have that hardworking thing you're talking about. You've got to have tenacity. You've absolutely got to hang in until you really are just running into a brick wall repeatedly. But you've really got to stay the journey because you just don't know when it's going to turn, and then how if you tweak it a bit or redefine it slightly, it could then catch a light.
So Brad, the question that I have for you now is, how do you know when you've got to have the tenacity and stick with it? Because some people give you the saying, the definition of stupidity is banging your head against a wall and not stopping. But that's the one side of it. The other side is keep banging your head against the wall, and sometimes you break through the wall. So where do you know, or how do you know, or do you even know?
So I don't know. I don't know that. I'm not very good at that. I will run into the wall too much. I would have been more successful if I eventually would have accepted on certain things that I must accept that I've made a mess up and live with it and have the humility to move on, whatever it is. But there's something in me that wants to keep at it until absolutely there's just you've blown more than you should have, and used up more resources than you should have. So I don't have that. I'm not very good at that. I'm good at the not giving upside, but you should. I think the answer would be a mentor. I've now got people, luckily at this stage, the business is growing. You've got wiser people that you could, a guy like you would say, but Brad, I mean, isn't it, my father would often say, and one of the things we've recently started, although we're still at it, isn't it a time to focus on your core? And unless you can weave this into your core, really, I can just see you. So you need mentorship. I don't have that automatic intuition of when to stop. I'm not good at that. But the other side is also true. If you give up too early, you'll never crack it as an entrepreneur, I don't think. Because it's hard. And you're going to get, if you're going to get negative too quickly, the only thing you've really got in the beginning is the idea and your positivity. And if you're going to get negative too quickly and give up too quickly, it might have turned the following week, month, and you're out. And then you'll never know you've missed it. So I don't have that answer.
And the luck factor, do you believe in luck, or is it like Gary Player says?
Yeah, I think it's Gary Player's. The harder you try, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
I do believe in luck, of course. But I think you look at a guy like Elon Musk, obviously there's been some luck, but he's tried hell of a hard to make that luck. And obviously he's a very bright guy and all the rest. But I believe in that Gary Player thing. There is luck, of course, there is timing. I mean, for instance, if we had our breakthrough instead of in markets in internet, and instead of renting out space to traders, I had a friend, Ronnie Uptick, who was renting out lease lines that he got from Telkom to corporates. He was lucky, in inverted commas. He worked damn hard and he was damn smart to recognize that opportunity. But he was lucky because the internet was going to go through the roof. Free markets was limited. So there is some luck, but both of us had to work our luck in our areas. Ours just happened to be a lot more limited than his. So there's a luck element, but you make your luck to a large degree.
And one of those things where you make your luck is, first of all, having the right idea and then following through. And I'm interested to hear that you were successful in creating one market, but then you failed in other markets after that. So it's not a formula that you have, and that formula will work in every situation.
Yeah, I think a market's a bit unique because if you had created a juice bar that worked very, very well in a shopping centre like Hyde Park, the chances of emulating that at Constantia in Cape Town or Sandton would be quite good, especially if you knew a bit about French. You could probably get it right. Market's different because you've got different traders in different areas. So the core, the stock, the feel of the market's totally different. So the fact that it's called BME Markets Hatfield, which is one we did and failed, doesn't really mean much because the traders from Joburg eventually get tired of going there. Now you're dealing with totally different traders in Cape Town, in Pretoria. And so the market was not a great example, but yeah, the third market, Hatfield, and the fourth one, I've forgotten where, Rivonia, Cloisters, those didn't work. Were we a bit lazy at that stage, not as hungry in the beginning? Were we overtrading because it was a Rosebank around the corner? I don't know the reasons. I can just tell you we put a lot more money in and knew a lot more and failed on both of those.
And did you get to understand the business of the actual traders? Do you know whether they were successful themselves? And would you look at some of your traders and say those are great entrepreneurs? Or are they only, maybe we could call it rentpreneurs? So they're renting space and that's all they're doing.
That's a good question. So what you start to see are trends. Brent would be really good at what product. Could eventually see at what type of trader would crack it. And obviously, owner managed the person that sat there going through the pain of sitting all day at the market, getting up at 4, 5, whatever. Owner managed rather than sticking a student in there was critical because the owner could firsthand quickly in one day know whether this new line was good or not. He wasn't hearing it through the student who might have been sitting with their headphones on and not even listening to the customer or being attentive to the customer. And that might have been the reason. They would sit there and find out for themselves. So owner managed was the sort of trader that would, for starters, be way ahead of the one who stuck a student in. The ones that, the tenacity that hung in, the ones that were bold enough to say, well, actually, maybe my product's not great. This candelabra, this is probably not. I'm being told this by 10 out of 11 customers. I'm not selling anything. And they were honest enough to, and it's hard. Your product, your creativity is not liked, to go and actually change that and tweak it. And also the ones that did not bet the farm. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. There was a guy, I can't remember his name now, here. He started a sauce called Bandito sauce. And he was a teacher, and he taught, and he worked damn hard. He worked 5 days in the week, and Saturday he made his sauce, and Sunday he came to the market. But he had that income from his teaching profession that he could stay in the market long enough to perfect that sauce, because it wasn't a rip-roaring success on day one. Whereas the other guy that had quit everything and was now at the market, who couldn't crack it in a month or two, was gone. So the trader that was smart, that didn't bet everything on that market stall being their be-all and end-all. In other words, Ken was inadvertently not betting the farm. He kept his teacher thing going till eventually it had such momentum that when he left his teaching job, he wasn't betting the farm, because he actually had a stall in other markets, he had a shop, he had a customer base. So those are the traders, the ones that were owner-managed, were flexible enough to accept that their product wasn't right and change it. And I think the ones who could stay there longer because they kept their day jobs were the ones that eventually endured as time. I mean, there's other examples that won't fit into that. But if I had to give you the things I learned, those are the ones that ended up doing better.
And then all of a sudden you're a producer of a movie, or you wrote the movie script, or a movie came out that you were involved in. Just take us through that. And how did you get involved in that? That's so different to anything else that you've done.
So one of the projects of AdReach was Learn to Swim, adopt a club initiative in Soweto called the Soweto Canoe Club. And AdReach had sponsored it, and we taught X number of kids how to swim. And some of these guys became really good canoeists, paddlers. And the one kid, Siseka, he's not a kid anymore, he's 30. He's actually a lawyer today, and he's still involved in the club and still top guy in the doozy. Teamed up with a friend of mine, actually ex-paddling part of Piers Cruikshank, who, for the Doozy Canoe Marathon, and the two of them, I won't ruin the whole story, but did incredibly well against the odds. And Piers went back to, he was the vice principal of Kingsmead, I think it was Kingsmead, or he was a senior head there. And he was talking on the Monday morning at assembly about his experience with Siseka. And I went to listen. I was on the way to work, and Piers told me to pop in. And while he was talking, I watched all these kids looking at him with blank faces, bored. Here goes Cruikshanks again. And by the end of it, all these kids were engaged. There were teachers crying. And I said to Piers afterwards, this thing can be a movie. And then we got a bit lucky. The guys that were making the Trevor Noah movie was a company called Heartlines. It's an NGO. And they try and do movies to change values in society and to improve society. It's a Christian-based organization, and they try and do good through movies. And Trevor Noah was their guy, and they were going to make a movie out, and they had all the funds. They had it from, I think it was Vodacom, a couple of big sponsors. And Trevor Noah got this big post in America. He left, he went to America. And we were just lucky that I asked actually Ronnie Upchurch at the time, he had made a movie. Who made his movie? And he told me, well, the best guys in the country are Craig Fremont and Robbie, the producers. And he said, but they won't even really speak to you because every second guy thinks they've got an opportunity for a movie. Anyway, I managed to convince them to meet us. I took them into Soweto. I showed them where Siseka came from, a shack, literally. I took them to Emmarentia, and I got these guys inspired on the story. And we were lucky in the sense that Craig or Robbie knew that Heartlines was looking for a topic, and the money was there, and so we actually got lucky. And they made, not me, they made the movie. But we were there, we were involved, we had to tell them this is realistic, this is not.
So, I mean, there's that saying, success is when preparation meets opportunity, and you kind of brought that together, and it creates an amazing story that I'm sure has inspired many people since. And then any other, you seem to be involved in combining business, as you said, business for good.
Yeah.
So you're doing business, but you're trying to uplift society in general.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of what we try and do now, and it's hard work. And I'm no longer running AdReach. There's Zuzu Mbata as the new CEO, is doing a fantastic job. I'm involved on that side you just spoke about. So, for example, F&B helped us set up a trust to fund micro businesses, give some people a chance in areas like Alex or Cape Town, Lunga, and take people who've got nothing, train them up, for example, to be scooter drivers, get them onto the Mr. Delivery or the Green Riders platform, and then Adreach would get the advertising rights on the boxes. And that's the type of business for purpose thing. F&B would fund those bikes interest-free for BE purposes. And that's the kind of win-win business for purpose thing we look at. Unfortunately, the business side of that's not as good as it should be. Not so easy to sell advertising on a scooter compared to a really big super light billboard on the middle of the road. But that is the type of thing. We try to do a thing with Bajaj. You've probably seen the Bolt. Those Bolt, yeah, we were involved with that up to a point, but not easy. But that's where we really try and put our focus in. We've had successes in terms of the actual upliftment side, but to make it sustainable and get the commercial side of it going is a challenge. But that's the type of thing we try and do.
So I like the way that you try and mix things together, that you're getting business involved for good and kind of, as you say, the win-win situation. So some of the things that kind of I picked up, just a couple of things of what you've said tonight, is try something. And if you do it, the market will tell you, your customer will tell you if you're achieving it and doing it correctly. Try and keep adding value to what you're doing. Do something different, like the rooftop market at a roof. It was a differentiation. Focus on what you're good at. And when you're doing something, it's good to put effort and money in it, but don't bet the farm. Because if you bet the farm and you lose it, you're no longer a farmer. So I think we could carry on talking quite a bit more, but unfortunately we've run out of time. But Brad, thank you very much. If you've just tuned in and you've just missed what we're talking about, I'm David Zidel. This is the Ort Jet Business Show, speaking to Brad Fisher, and you can pick up on the podcast at a later stage. And I look forward to seeing you next week, same time. Good evening.